Thank you for joining us today at Homestead for Life. Today we are canning onions, and not just any onions. We are canning caramelized onions. So they are going to be nice, flavored, seasoned, ready to add to whatever your favorite dish for them is, like throwing them on a pizza or anything else. They are ready to go. What we're going to do is we're going to turn our stove on medium-high, and we're going to put whatever you want to use for oil, for your fat, in your pan. This is bacon grease. This is my jar of bacon grease that lives next to the stove. Probably more common to use would be olive oil, which would have less of an impact on the flavor at the end of it. But I was going to do it that way just to be more simplistic, more basic for this recipe. And then I realized there's really nothing that I put onions in that I'm not okay with adding bacon to. So bacon grease it is. While we're waiting for our bacon grease to heat up, let's talk about our supplies. So we have our Carey Canner. Love this thing. We've got our canning funnel with the measurements on it, so it makes measuring the headspace on your jars so much easier. We've got our jar grabber thingy, our lid lifter. It's got a magnet on the bottom. We've got magnet on the bottom. We've got our spatula, also called stabby thing, depending on the day. Our rings, our lids. So the jars I grabbed, some of them are regular mouth, some of them are wide mouth. Most people prefer the wide mouth jars. They are harder to come by typically. I get a lot of my jars used. I'll pick them up at yard sales and things like that. And I typically find the regular mouth jars there. So what I use is literally just whatever I grabbed out of my stockpile of jars. So we've got our jars, our rings, our lids. Let's talk about lids for a second. So all of my canning goddesses, the people that taught me the magical things, swear by Ball lids, okay? Ball mason jars, the Ball brand. They literally wrote the book. They made the jars. Maybe not all my jars, half my jars, yard sales. But the folks that I know that have been canning for eons and eons use Ball lids. The folks that I know that sell canned goods only use the Ball lids, at least on the things that they're selling. So there's something to that, right? Whereas mine, I've bought some, these are just Walmart brand lids. I've got some off Amazon. I've never had a bad seal. And when I buy lids at the store, it's hit or miss. You know, Walmart doesn't always have the Ball ones, so I'll buy their brand or vice versa. So for me, it's been a hit or miss on which ones I buy. I haven't lost a seal on a canned jar yet. I think my oldest jars that I've kept, that I've still got stored that I didn't, use earlier, my oldest jars at the moment are about 4 years old and change. I need to get better at rotation, but those lids are still solid. So make your own choices there, but Ball has been proven reliable. All the experts say it. What else do I have for supplies? My vinegar. Okay, so I've got my little dish of vinegar. I'll use that with a paper towel to wipe the rims of the jars, and I will also pour the rest of it, if I remember, into the canner to help keep the outside of the jars less cloudy. And I think that's it for supplies. You'll notice that my jars here have some water in them, because once we get our onions cooking, I'm going to load up this canner and get the water and the jars and everything heated up. So I want water inside the jars as well, so the heat's more well-rounded, less likely to crack or stress the jars. Also keeps them from floating, so they all sit nice in the canner while they're getting heated up. We'll talk about that later. But my bacon grease is ready to go. Let's go cook some onions. Okay, so I'm going to put about half of my onions in here. I've already pre-sliced them, washed them, peeled them, pre-cut them, whatever the case may be. I'm going to turn the heat down on this a little bit. gonna get about half of them in here, and then we're gonna stir them every couple minutes, mix them up real good. All right, that looks like about half, right? So we'll just keep stirring them as they cook down and get that lovely caramelized brown texture, look, flavor, I guess. Add some bacon flavor to our onions. All right, so while those are going, let's go back to our canner. So back and forth today, I'm sorry, but let's go back to our canner and get those jars heated up. Okay, so we are gonna load up the canner with our jars. Make sure you have your rack, the metal trivet, or plastic trivet, rubber trivet, that's what you got, whatever. Make sure your trivet's in the bottom. There's not enough water, they're still floating away. Well, now they've accidentally added more water just from the canner. Amateur hour over here, I'm telling you. Okay, so we're gonna close and lock the canner. We're gonna leave it on exhaust. Leave it on exhaust, and then we are going to slow cook and start. And that's it. It'll warm up and slow cook for about 30 minutes, getting the jars hot, getting the water hot, getting everything ready for us there. So then it's just waiting on everything to finish cooking. I think I need more bacon grease. Let's add more bacon grease. Our onions are almost done, so we've been stirring them every maybe 3 minutes or so. So they're nice and brown. We've got a couple little charred bits at the bottom. They are ready to go. So we are going to turn off our canner, open this sucker up. Remember, we put it on slow cook to heat our jars. We are going to very, very carefully take our hot jars, dump the water back into the canner, and set our jars out so they are ready for our our caramelized onions. So I did a full load of jars here, 5 jars, knowing that I was not going to fill 5 jars. I was hoping to get 3, maybe 4. 5 was being a little optimistic. I'd rather have too many jars ready to go than not enough, right? But anyone who's cooked onions knows that when they cook and they get soft, they cook down and essentially shrink up a bit. I don't know if they so much shrink as now they just kind of fold into tiny little pieces. But we do not have a full pot of onions anymore. That pot was pretty level full, and now it's maybe a quarter full. So we're gonna fill up as many jars as we can, but I think it's gonna be like not quite 2 jars. So we'll see. We'll see. But we're gonna go over to the stove and get our onions. Another thing I did here while the onions were cooking down is I got our pot of water on that back burner, heating up our lids a little bit. So we're going to turn everything off, stir our onions a bit, and carefully pour them into our hot jar. And I think I'm going to end up with 1 pint, a whole pot of onions, and we're going to have 1 pint. It is kind of crazy how far down they cook. Oh my goodness, not even quite a full pint from a whole pot. So we don't have a lot of stabbing or anything to do to make space. We definitely have our inch of head space. For our onions here, we need at least 1 inch of head space. Okay, so we're gonna head back over to the counter and get this ready to go. Okay, we've got our jar here. If we had full jars, this is where we'd be stabbing it down and getting all those air pockets out, making sure we've got 1 inch of head space. We've got like 2.5 inches of head space. We're good. So the next step is cleaning the rim of our jar to make sure the lid goes on nice and smooth, no debris, no crumbs, no anything like that getting in the way of the seal. We're going to remember to pour our vinegar into the canner. We are going to carefully use our magnet stick. Which jar did I grab? I grabbed a largemouth jar. So I need a largemouth lid and a largemouth ring. Finger tight. And then we're going to load the jar and set it for 70 minutes. We're going to leave it on exhaust. 75 minutes. So we're going to go high. "75 minutes and start." So when it beeps and gives us that 10-minute countdown, we're going to come over when it's at about E0, E1, and we're going to switch this from exhaust to airtight. Then the pressure is going to build and the countdown is on. So now we wait. Okay, our countdown timer is down to E0, so we are going to flip this to airtight. It's going to get to that exact right pressure, and then our timer is going to start. So that usually just takes a few minutes, and then that 75 minutes will start up. So we'll see you then. Our timer has gone off, so we are going to unplug it and leave it for a minimum of 1 hour. Mine's going to be more like 8 or 9 hours because I'm going to sleep. We will check this puppy in the morning. We are back and ready to check our canner. So it's been overnight, right? So it's been unplugged for well more than an hour. But before we do, let's talk about a couple things with the onions. So we didn't use a recipe, which means we really have no idea at the end of it how many jars it's going to fill. So if you're using a recipe you found that's tried and true online or through someone you know, you're going to have a better idea of how many jars you're going to fill. I sliced up before we started filming about 4 pounds of onions, and we got 1 jar. So I know they shrink down some. I wasn't quite expecting that kind of ratio, but had I followed a recipe, I would have. So learn from me, I suppose. Also, slicing the onions. We did a video last year about dehydrating and freeze drying onions, and some folks shared some great tips about refrigerating your onions or using a wet cloth next to them to keep it from burning your eyes. I tried both of those things, but still by the time I was halfway through my 4 pounds of onions, my eyes were screaming. So if you've got any other tips or tricks on that, please let me know. The refrigeration seemed to help a little bit, but maybe they just warmed up too fast. Certainly didn't help for 4 pounds of onions, but they didn't bother me for the first 4 onions. So let's check our canner. We have 1 jar, and it is about halfway now, but they are canned, sealed, ready to go. So next time you're cooking burgers or a steak or anything like that, you've got onions already caramelized, ready to go on top. Thank you for joining us at Homestead for Life. Please like and subscribe to our channel.